recording started. So there's the documentation for PrintWriter. The one thing I always find convenient about reading is going and looking at the actual Java documentation is that it's very easy to find the constructors, okay, which is sort of handy. It's not as easy, I find, in Eclipse to find constructors for things that you haven't written yet. Once you've written them, you can type variable dot and get all of the methods pretty easily, but seeing the constructors, sometimes this is the easiest way. And notice all of the different ways that you can make a print writer. So this is this idea that it's not unusual to see classes that have multiple constructors depending on what you want to do. What was the one that we used?
File string, second one.
There's our print writer. We just used a string there. And if you look at the documentation, it says, well, you can use a string if you want. And your other choice is that you can use a file object. Okay, so this one allows you to do both. My guess is that what happens is when you make call it with a string like this, all it does is it makes a file object itself. Right? And so we could sort of do that in this case, is we could go in here and we could say new file, see if that works. And there's a method to my madness here for why I'm choosing to do it this way. Okay, so that gives this idea that PrintWriter explicitly works with files and that the string is actually a file name. Okay. And we saw that somehow magically ended up making a file called myfile.txt and putting it in the current directory wherever that happened to be. Okay. So now we get to, if Daryl were ever to make an infomercial, my infomercial for Java would be the scanner class, because the scanner class is like the Swiss Army knife of things that you can do with files all rolled into one. Okay. And it's a fairly recent addition to Java. I think if we go and we look at Scanner, it's about Java 1.6. We'll go look at the documentation. So we're on Java 1.7, which I think is 2 or 3 years old. So it came essentially late in the life of Java. And the reason they put the Scanner class in is that there were all sorts of other ways that you could do I/O, all of which involved all sorts of weird trickery and way too much antics. And the Scanner class happens to be relatively easy to use. Okay, so it was essentially a retrofit. The way you use it is you say scanner, make a variable name is a new scanner, and then you pick the name of the file, and I'm going to just do that thing there so that I get the same file. That would be a good thing to turn into a constant eventually. And then you add in the correct import statement. And then a scanner works like an iterator. So you say while a scanner dot, look at all of the iterator looking options. You can do has next of pretty much anything. Booleans, bytes, integers. Oh look, patterns. Regular expressions magically appear, so you can scan with regular expressions because I know you love them so much. Okay, so that option is available. Notice that there's a whole lot of them, but let's just do the one that looks for a line at a time. So whether or not, so the question is there another line available in the file? Okay, and if the answer is yes, then we'll talk to a scanner and we'll say, I think it's just the next line, next, one of those billions of options, next line, and next line gives back an entire string, and then we can just print that out. okay, and run source format to make it pretty. And there's a lovely error message for you. Remember yesterday we were talking about closing files, and it's saying in this case that file is never going to be closed. You're never going to let the operating system know that you're done with it. It's just going to run off the end of the program. In truth, running off the end of the program is going to close the file, as is running off the end of a method, because then the variable will go away. But still, just to be nice, what we should do to be complete is say ascanner.close to say we're done with the file when we're done with it. And that'll make the nasty little yellow warning go away. Okay, so open the file, read a bunch of stuff, and then close the file. Okay, and just let me run that thing. By the way, there's an extra hello up here, so maybe I'll just get rid of that one for a second. So I'm just going to see the stuff that I wrote to the file. Okay, and we'll run it. And so I wrote the file, and then I read it back in again and printed it out. Okay, that's all there is to it. Scanner is your friend. This could be some longer line. Okay, so just to show you that it's not just a word at a time, but it's a line at a time. So if you run it now, you get a line at a time. Okay, now, just to show you why I said new file here, watch what happens with scanner if I just do that, which is what we originally started with print writer, right? We'll run that. What did it just do?
Treated it as a string.
It's basically saying, here's a string, scan the string. So this is the one line of stuff that happens to be in the string, and so it ran through and it scanned the string and printed out the string. And if you go and look at the, we'll go and find the scanner constructors. Of course, this thing is just really twiddly to use. Almost. No, there we are. By the way, oh look, they supplied documentation. Isn't that nice? Here's one of the few examples in the documentation where they provide some examples. We'll just go back and look at them in a minute. Oh look, there's all sorts of gobbledygook there. There's all of the options for scanner, and that notice that this thing, if you say scanner with a string, it scans the values from the string rather than scanner from a file scans from the file. Okay, so scanner is one that's a little tricky. It doesn't, you know, they're not consistent in the way they deal with things here. Print writer says, oh, okay, I'll treat that string as either a file name or you know, a string as a file name. That's fine. Scanner is a little special because if you say scan a string, it scans the string and it doesn't treat it as a file name. Okay, so a little bit of weirdness there. While we're at it, let's just go back up and look at this documentation and see if there's anything interesting there. We'll get to system.in in a second, but there is this example that basically I just used. You can go and scan a file, and notice they actually said new file there. And notice that has next long says, is the next thing actually a long integer? and it will keep scanning long integers. Okay, so you can actually use the scanner class to parse specific things out of a file. If you know that it's in integers coming up, you can insist that they be integers and not something else and get an error if they're not. Okay, so it's got some really useful capabilities that way. And also notice that Scanner has the ability to do what looks very much like pattern matching. Okay, so all of those lovely things that you can do with regular expressions are fair game in here. Okay, which is
documentation for what Java takes, or is it pretty much the same?
The short answer for regular expression stuff is that almost all of it across programming languages looks the same. And I said almost all of it because there are some differences in the regular expressions amongst various things, particularly when you get to the weird sorts of stuff that you don't use very often. Then it seems to be not quite as ordinary. There is documentation for all of the regular expression stuff, and I'll show you that in a second. But oh look, it looks like, oh look, find in line, and they're using some sort of nasty regular expression there that you should probably be able to read somehow. Okay, and just a quick look down, anything else. It talks about localized numbers, so somehow it knows all about all sorts of weird things about numbers from different languages. And most of these are either next or has next types of things. And by the way, let's just find one for something that looks like a, that says regular expression. The nice thing about also about using this documentation is that it tends to be hyperlinked, and so you can go and you can find out wherever you see something that says, I was just looking for one that says regular expression, and you can follow the hyperlinks along to see what is and isn't allowed for regular expressions wherever it happens to be. I can't find it off the top of my head. But yeah, you can also look, I think there's a regular expression class someplace up here, and I think it's even called regex. Nope, it's called something else, pattern, just to be different. Here we go. So you can form a pattern object that has the matching capability in it, and there's your documentation for all of the official regular expression stuff that it recognizes. And like I say, for the most part, they're all pretty similar. Okay, so yeah, at least the documentation is there for it. Okay, so that was just reading a file worth of text, and so I'm just going to put that back there to what it was. Well, that's sort of interesting. I guess we can actually do strings. So let's do an example with using the scanner class for strings. So here's something that you might do. I've got a string that I want to parse that's got name equals value stuff. So pairs of things separated by spaces with equals separating the values. And I want to parse that stuff and get just name, Fred, and just social insurance number, and then the value. Okay, so basically parse it into the pairs of things. Okay, well, let's give that a try. What you can do in that case is you can make a new scanner object. And dump the string into it like that, and then we could do while string scan dot has next, what should we use? Line would give us the whole line, but it's all on one